What we see sleeping here is a female. Metraea Canthosaurus. Sunbathing, waiting for prey to come near. She is considered the queen of Isle Pina, the smallest island of the 5 deaths of Costa Rica. And as a soon-to-be mother, she must find the largest prey that she can possibly take down. However, in her conditions, she is not able to hunt down a 4-ton herbivore. Her mate, on the other hand, though, is full of energy and hasn't eaten a meal in 4 days. Though he only barely weighs a ton, he still shows his strength as a predator, taking down this 4-ton hadrosaur. Once he's finished with his shares, his mate will soon follow. Ingen brought back the Metriacanthosaurus by filling in the gaps of its DNA with hyenas, meaning the male is not the one in charge between the two, only getting a fraction of what the female will consume. However, now that food is running low, they will soon have to migrate, and where they are moving is almost an all-you-can-eat buffet. On this dry river canal leads a rock path towards a massive watering hole, one that Ingen made as a center source for hydration, for a potential wildlife resort where guests could drive around and watch the dinosaurs in their natural habitat. However, once the park shut down in 1992, all operations were ceased, and Ingen had to abandon the project. So now, all the dinosaurs roam free on the island, to roam and survive. But which dinosaurs are on this island, and why these ones in particular? Say hello to the lake's smallest residents, Pachycephalosaurus, only measuring in at 15 feet and weighing under 1,000 pounds. Pachycephalosaurus make up for it with numbers and staying next to the larger, more safer herbivores, as so is the other residents of the lake, Gigantospinosaurus, an animal that is a relative of the Stegosaurus family. As with one look, you will notice the spikes on its tail, also known as thagomizers, along with the rows of plates on its back. It more than likely used its tail to defend itself against predators from its origin point in China, like Yangchuanosaurus as an example, Amechiracanthosaurus, Ancestor. However, there is another animal with spikes that cover its body, along with lots of armor, also known as osteoderms, that patrols the lake. This is the Sauropelta, an ankylosaur, the oldest resident of the lake. With all the armor on its back, there is very few predators that can put it down, and none large enough on this island. The last one to make an attempt met an early end with a bed of spikes rammed into its stomach. And on that day, the Sauropelta was deemed as a sort of guardian to protect the lake. However, he isn't alone, as the other oldest resident, the iguanodon, has considered the lake a home for it to stay its ground. It weighs in at a whopping 3.5 tons, though not impressive for a herbivore. On this island, the iguanodon is one of the largest animals on Isle Pena. However, an achievement like that means nothing to this poor bull, when he's got no others of his kind walking around to socialize with. Gigantospinosaurus was a stegosaur from late Jurassic Pentang, China, 160 million years ago, discovered in 1985 by scientist Qiang Hui. However, it was thought to have been another species of stegosaur for a while, known as Tuozhangasaurus, until they unearthed another specimen from Fuquan the next year, and then in 2006 was dubbed the name Gigantospinosaurus, also known as the giant-spined lizard, characterized by the giant spikes on the side of its body. The air is humid, making it difficult for animals to cool off, so the Pachys decide to go swimming, due to the island being so close to the equator. It gets hot and quick, which is why these animals live next to this lake. Large water supplies means more swimming room. And more, swimming room, means more places to cool off. Other herbivores, like the sauropelta, use the shade of the plants to hide from the sunlight to cool off. The iguanodon, however, doesn't need to, as it can regulate its body temperature in order to cool off. The iguanodon has a bizarre history, as it was one of the first dinosaurs ever discovered by a scientist named Gideon Mantell, an England paleontologist, whose first findings were that of iguana-like teeth, giving the name iguanodon, or iguana tooth. However, that wasn't even the weird part. The weird part was the original reconstruction of what iguanodon was, as when scientists discovered its famous thumb claw, they initially thought it was the horn of a lizard, and so scientists reconstructed iguanodon into this bulky-looking lizard. However, as our understanding of prehistory became more clear, we reconstructed it over the next 200 years into the animal you see here today. Ingen wanted at least one animal on this island to have a unique story to tell, as iguanodon was a fascinating animal to read the history of, to help people understand the history of paleontology. So the iguanodon was named the star attraction of Isle Pina. However, Ingen never took the welfare of its lifestyle into consideration, as iguanodon would have lived in herds, as numbers were the best form of protection against predators of its time. During the early Cretaceous, 140 million years ago. Our smallest residents, the Pachycephalosaurus. Its fossils were discovered in 1859 in the Lance Formations in Montana, originally thought to have been some reptilian armadillo species, until 1985, when it was classified as a new genus, Pachycephalosaurus, the thick-headed lizard. However, it wasn't the only one. There were two other Pachycephalosaur species, Dracorex and Stygimoloch, both thrown into this theory that those animals were but merely growth stages of Pachycephalosaurus. However, that question was answered in 1990, when Ingen brought back all three animals, and now there is no longer a debate. As nighttime falls, the Pachys seek one last drink of water before heading back into the grass to sleep away, in the nice, cool moisture coming off the leaves. Well, most of them at least. The sauropelta watches the Pachys walk out into the water as he's taking a drink. But as they get closer, he walks off, trying to get some privacy, as nodosaurids are not social animals in the slightest. On the contrary, the iguanodon is a highly social animal, who has shown time and time again mimicking acts the Pachys have committed. Like swimming, Ingen thought the Pachys would be perfect social animals for the iguanodon, and in a sense, they were correct. As any time the Pachys are out swimming, he will join in and play along, as a way to show he is only a gentle giant. In the dawn, the watering hole has been introduced to an uninvited guest, and an insanely dangerous one. He may look familiar to you, but rest assured, this is no Tyrannosaurus rex. This is the Albertosaurus, the largest predator of Isla Pina. This creature weighs in at 1.5 tons and is over 30 feet long. Just large enough to take on the island megafauna. However, as it browses the lake, it notices easier prey. Like the Chunkingosaurus on the other side of the lake, however, this apex predator has a challenger to prevent it from achieving a meal. The iguanodon being said challenger. Unfortunately for the Albertosaurus, the iguanodon has no desire to back down as it challenges him by combat. The iguanodon charges in. The herbivore has experience and size on its side for this battle. However, The Albertosaurus could take it down with a quick bite to the neck, and it's far more agile. On the other end, the iguanodon has a killer thumb claw, though used mostly for digging up plants, could easily leave serious damage on a challenger. Unfortunately, the iguanodon cannot risk getting too close to the predator's jaw, so it must resort to using its sheer body weight to push the predator off balance or to scare it off. However, too many wounds have already forced the animal to retreat, meaning the Albertosaurus has succeeded and will find prey to feast upon.